3 days. The remaining days of the week you're actually working. So it could be with a panchayat, it could be with a special school, it could be a hospital. So that work that you actually do there is what gives you a sense of what you would be getting into later on. So I think those 2 years were really the I'd say the game changer in my life. It really made me realize, yes, this is what I really wanted to do.
Excellent. So I think the social aspect has been right very early on for both of you. You, I think in case of you, it probably is in your DNA thanks to your grandma.
Yeah.
So, but the entrepreneurship part, how did that kind of develop? Where did you get the idea of? Is that also something early on?
Yeah. So, it all started in 2004. I was consulting, so I got an opportunity to work in UK, and so we started living in a small village called Kidlington, 4 miles from Oxford, and that was our first travel anywhere outside the country, and beautiful village, fantastic in terms of every aspect of whatever you would need, and also there was also a time when we, for the first time, began to understand what somebody back home meant when they said India is a developing country. Because for the first time we were experiencing the developed state. And then the next question we asked ourselves was, so how much time would it take for India to get there? And the simple test we applied was, if you were to identify a village back home in India, probably a small village of as small as Kidlington, and then say that how much time would it take for it to get to that level? And we didn't find easy answers. In fact, we went to a point of saying that it's not a question of how many years, but then how many perhaps lifetimes would it take for India to get there? And that is when sort of it triggered a series of thoughts. And what was a very good thing to do in hindsight was we made a promise to ourselves. We said, well, let's give ourselves 2 years. 2 years it is, and then we get back to India. What would we do after coming back to India? That didn't bother us. Because in a country like India, you're spoiled for choice. Right? You can pick up any issue and spend your entire life trying to solve it. But we made this promise, and we said, we parked the idea, and we said, okay, and we went about going about our lives. And things magically started happening. So I got picked up by a company which I always, it was like a dream company for me, a company called Vignette.
Okay.
I joined them in their professional services team. And if you'd asked me, what would you like to do apart from work, I would have, we would have both said, we would like to travel and see the world. And this was the India office, and they, as part of the job description, it involved a lot of travel to Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And the more we traveled, the more we saw, we had this renewed sense of urgency to get back home. Because this whole notion of, India not getting there, even though there are many great examples of countries who have actually, overcome that, the hurdle, if you will, we felt that, there's a lot we could do. And that's, in some sense, set the foundation. So in some sense, we were quite driven by purpose, and therefore entrepreneurship happened by itself. It was not that we wanted to be an entrepreneur, but it was the purpose which we wanted to follow. It said, and the way we looked at it was, whatever it takes to make that happen. Right? If it is entrepreneurship, so be it.
Interesting, very exciting, as in. So this is your entrepreneurship foray, really. This is the first time. It's not like you've run a business and then you branched out. How long did you work before, as a professional, before you got into India?
Close to 9 years.
Okay. Going back a step, I'm curious. I'm not sure about everybody. How did the we happen? Smita and you.
Right. So I came to Bangalore, and I wanted to understand, and I used to get very fascinated by actually my story, the stories of founders of social organizations. So I used to take deep fascination. So the next best thing I could do was volunteer. So I used to volunteer for a couple of non-profits in Bangalore. And and there was this non-profit called Crystal's Theatre, run by Diana Tulur, and she used to use drama as a form of therapy for special children. And she used to work with special schools. And Smita used to work with one of the special schools called Fame India, which was started by Mr. N.S. Raghavan, co-founder of Infosys. So I remember my first question to Smita, if you really want to know, was my job that day as a volunteer was to organize lunches for all the children who came from different schools. So my first question to her was, how many children do you have?
And I said 29.
So I make sure that got those. So that's how we met and we kept in touch, and we found there was a lot of similarities with what we wanted to do in the future. So,
And my family was very happy when Ram said he wanted to marry me, because they had kind of given up. They're like, who's going to marry this lady? She's just doing social work and nobody's going to get married. So they found it a big relief when Ram said, oh, we actually want to get married. They were like, okay.
Yeah, so I was curious. I think, what's interesting is a lot of us, I think most of us are charged up towards the social, we all want to do something, we all want to make a difference, but it's absolutely phenomenal the way you guys have actually stuck to it and made a go for it, and today you're running this absolutely fantastic organization, and yeah, we're going to just see it grow. You told us that the birth of Rande was somewhere in Oxford. It was the villages you went around. You saw, your travels told you a lot, and you had a renewed vigor to come back and make a change. Any interesting stories that really triggered that? So I'm sure the entire collection of the experience would have, but anything interesting that kind of sticks out and that you'd like to tell us?
well, I remember when I was getting in, so at Vignette, my colleagues came from 13 different countries.
Okay.
And I remember when I was getting into the induction program, there was this guy, Rosario, who became a very good friend later on, but he was from Italy and came from the countryside. So, and his perception of India was that it's a third world country. And he found it very hard to believe that I had joined Vignette at the same position as he was. So his first question was, are you from one of the brightest, smartest college in India? So my answer to him was, well, actually on the contrary, I'm actually not at all from one of the smartest in the country. So I think later on, I think this perception, which I think in spite of our GDP growth back then, which used to be, the sort of cause of concern, if you will. But I think the fact remained that all the perception the country had, thanks to the documentaries on Channel 4, BBC 2, and so on, the perception was continuously getting renewed that India is indeed a third world country. I think conversations like these, experiences like that, which essentially, made us really, plan our transition.
In my case, actually, I used to work for the Oxfordshire County Council. So all the social work, the community work, everything is managed by the local government there. And one of the projects that I worked on was called Learning Communities. And we worked on 3 estates. So estates is basically where a lot of underserved communities would live. And we worked in those 3 estates. And the objective of the project was to see how we could bring back people to learning. So these were adults who had missed out on, completing their education for some reason or the other. So how could you make, how could you give them access to education and help them complete their courses? And I was, one of the, initial team members of this project. And as part of the project, we used to actually give away laptops to the community members. These were IBM ThinkPads. We used to give away to them. And they would get access to internet, so they could access all the e-learning programs. We worked with Oxford Brookes University to develop programs for them. you know, having worked in the social work space in India and then going and working there,